Okay? I need to start throwing things at you guys to wake you up. All right. We're almost through. I'll let you guys out early, and then we'll be done with this chapter. Okay? The Flynn Effect. Does anybody know what this is? The Flynn Effect. Yeah, go ahead. It's kind of. One of the explanations for the Flynn Effect is. So the Flynn Effect is that we have seen over the past century of IQ test scoring that people are getting smarter. Every decade, their IQ score on average goes up 3 points. Why?
Because we learn more as like a race.
Humans are just learning more. You have more knowledge. We've got little computers in our pocket. What else? Diversity. How is diversity playing a role?
Well, I mean, now like everything's like getting more diverse, so we learn more about culture and the ways other people learn and stuff.
So more social interaction is stimulating our brain? Okay, absolutely. No? Okay. Can you think of anything else? Nutrition. How many of you know someone who's starving? Starving, right? Nobody knows that. You know, if you were in a different country, you might be the person starving. But nowadays, our problem is too many calories, not too few calories. And we know that proper nutrition develops your brain. Now, when my grandma was born, she was born during the Great Depression, and she can remember not eating many times because there's no food.
Yeah, she panics when she doesn't have food.
She panics when she doesn't have food, exactly. So is that impacting, did it impact her brain development? Absolutely. I mean, she's a smart lady, but could she have been smarter? Possibly. As a little kid, you need to be eating. Would you mind shutting up? Just until the crowd goes by?
Right. I mean, gain.
You gain.
Right.
Now that's an interesting point because nutrition is now going back down. So even though we're eating a lot, we're not getting all of the vitamins and minerals and all the nutrients that we need in order to be healthy. As a matter of fact, the millennials, you guys are the next generation, but the millennials are the first generation expected to live shorter lives than their parents. And you guys are supposed to be following right along with that track and be even worse. Okay? You're going to die at a younger age than your parents, is the prediction. What was that? Well, if you're eating appropriately. Now, here's the thing. Even if you're eating appropriately, modern agriculture methods are so bad for the environment that it's stripping the soil of all its nutrients. For instance, magnesium in the soil has dropped by, I think, 40%. So you eat a carrot, and you think I'm eating healthy, but it has, half the nutrients in it as when your grandparents were kids eating a carrot. So you have to eat like twice as many vegetables in order to get the same amount of nutrition that your grandparents or great-grandparents would have been eating. And then again, most of you are not eating healthy. On average, junk food makes up 27% of the American diet. 27%. And I'm going to guess for teenagers it's probably higher than that. How many of you would say more than a quarter of your diet is junk food? Okay? So not only are you not getting enough nutrients, but then all of those sugars they require nutrients in order to be processed. So they use up the little amount of vitamins and minerals that you have in your body. And so probably every American teenager is vitamin deficient. And then, of course, we're on this low-fat kick, right? And the government keeps telling us, don't eat fat, it's bad for you. But your brain will not develop properly unless you're eating enough fat. Okay? The brain requires fat. Every cell in your body is built with fat, especially your brain cells. Your brain is very high in fat. So if you're not eating enough fat in your diet, especially as babies up to teenage years, your brain isn't developing like it should. Okay? All right, so there's a bunch of different reasons. Daily life is more challenging. A couple centuries ago, 90% of the country were farmers. So your daily life consisted of collecting the eggs and milking the cow. And now you guys all have these laptops and cell phones and driving cars. And
nowadays, if you went out at night, you sold into slavery.
Right. Nowadays or back then?
No, back then.
I don't know, but nowadays
I don't know, I feel
it might be more dangerous. But yeah, it could happen, especially with the Indians. Nutrition is better in the sense that you're not starving to death. Reasoning ability stressed by the IQ has gotten better. This is one of the theories. Not that your IQ has actually increased, but that your ability to take the test has increased. Because every test we take nowadays is very similar to the IQ. Whereas when my grandma was a kid, she didn't take multiple choice tests. And so then if she had gone and taken an IQ test, it would have been totally foreign to her. The last one is hybrid vigor. And this kind of brings the diversity thing into the picture again. Hybrid vigor is originally an agricultural term. So I have cows, I have Highland cows. And Highland cows, like all purebred cows, they have babies just like themselves. However, if you breed them with like an Angus or a Brahma or a different breed of cows, their baby is going to be superior to either parent. They'll have more meat, they'll have more milk, they'll be healthier, they'll develop faster. And so most farmers who are production farmers, like raising meat, will have mixed breed mutt cows in order to have the healthiest cow possible. And we found that this same thing works with humans. We get hybrid vigor in humanity. So if you have purebred humans, their babies tend to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And the reason is because if you look at genetics, right, you have, for girls, you have an X what chromosome? XX. Okay? So on these chromosomes, you'll have genetic problems. So let's say you've got these two genetic issues on the chromosome. For instance, I had my DNA tested and I carry the genetics for ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay.
Stephen Hawking has.
What was that?
Stephen Hawking said it.
Yes, Stephen Hawking had it. So I have the genetic potential of having that. However, I'm hoping it will never be expressed because the question is, do you have a matching chromosome, a matching bit of DNA that will make up for it? So if on this leg the same DNA is fine, what your body will do is they'll read the same DNA on the other side and see if it fixes the problem, and then it'll fix it. So this genetic disorder right here is not expressed because you have a good chromosome on this side. This is why boys have more genetic issues because they're missing one leg of the chromosome, so they're XY. So now if there's any genetic issues on this leg, there's no matching piece of the chromosome in order to read from. So now the more inbred a population gets, remember these are passed down, so you're more and more likely to have the same genetic issues from both mom and dad. But if mom and dad are diverse, you're not going to have the same issues. You know, you might get a genetic problem from dad there, but mom doesn't have it. So the more diversity in a population, the less genetic issues, and now the more superior the offspring are. So Hitler actually had it exactly backwards. He was trying to develop this pure race, and he should have been trying to get a mixed race. That is the only superior race, is the more genetically mixed they are. Which I think is why America is at the top of the game in just about everything, because we have all this genetic diversity. If you look at any country throughout history that has been a melting pot of different races coming together, they always have all of these amazing bits of art and science and music and all these things that come out of that culture. Spain, for instance, became very genetically diverse with the Moorish invasion and Jews moving there. I mean, everybody who was anybody moved to Spain. And then they had, during that time period, they just had all these amazing advances coming out of their country. Okay? So that's what hybrid vigor is. You mix the genetics up, you get superior offspring. So that might be why the IQ score is getting higher every decade in America, because we have more and more races coming in and more races mixing. Okay? All right, we're getting there, people. We're getting there. You guys are just suffering today, huh? You want to open that window again? It is hot in here, isn't it? All right, Pygmalion Effect. Somebody know the story of Pygmalion? No. Are you sure? Nobody? What are your teachers teach you nowadays?
Obviously not this.
Not enough.
Did anybody's teacher ever teach you about Oedipus? You're talking about the Oedipus complex, right?
Wait.
The
Oedipus is
Yeah.
in the Cobra.
Where he marries his mom, unbeknownst to him.
Oh,
And then stabs out his eyes.
Huh?
Then he stabs out.
He gouges out his own eyes with his sons, yeah. And then wonders the world.
heard the word before.
Pygmalion was a Greek guy, of course, who he was an amazing sculptor, and he decided he was going to sculpt the perfect woman. And so he got this big chunk of marble and he sculpted it. Do you remember the story?
A little bit, yeah.
And he sculpted the most beautiful woman ever. And she was so perfect, so much what he wanted, that he fell in love with this cold chunk of marble. And eventually, I think Athena, the goddess of love, had pity on him and decided to turn her into a human so that he could actually have his love. It's one of the nice Greek stories.
One of them.
Yeah, most Greek stories are terrible.
Wait, what story?
Okay.
Oedipus?
Oedipus? You know, I can never remember. Greek and Roman gods were the same, but they had different names for them. So,
No, Athena is the goddess of like wisdom.
Yeah, you're right. So it's Aphrodite or Venus. Those are the two same.
Venus was
Yeah. So I can't remember. I think Aphrodite is Greek, so that's probably which one it was. Greek mythology. You know, there's a lot. This is a whole other subject, but there's a lot of controversy about, are these stories things that people just, told around the fire to entertain each other, or are they based on some sort of truth? Now, do I believe there really is a god called Zeus? No, but could there have been a person named Zeus who was a king, who was very powerful, who slept around with every woman he could find?
Sounds like Benjamin Franklin.
Okay, it's possible. So the stories could have come from somebody real, and the Bible actually does mention it. If you believe in the Bible, somebody told me that once, and I was like, that's the weirdest, most interesting thing ever. So in the Bible, it says that the angels came down. I don't know if it's the good angels or the bad angels, demons, but it said they slept with earthly women, and then their babies were the heroes of old. And so I was watching a show where they said these may have been the original Greek gods and goddesses and Hercules and all those people. But that's such an interesting theory. So, are they real? I could not tell you. I have no idea. I hope they were. That would be so interesting, wouldn't it? Okay, Hercules, a real man of strength.
And what's the effect?
So Pygmalion, of course, he created somebody in his own image, sort of thing, and fell in love with her. So Pygmalion effect for humans in psychology is if you expect somebody to behave in a certain way, you can create of that person what you envision in them. So if you have a child and you say, this child is going to be a brat just like her dad that I hate, I should have never married him, she's going to be just like him when she grows up, she probably will. Okay? Or you get in a relationship and you're sure he's going to leave you. I hear women say this all the time. I'm always abandoned. He's going to abandon me too. Well, then you become so clingy and needy and suspicious that, he leaves you. What was that?
And then you become so clingy that no one wants you in the first place.
You become so clingy, nobody wants you in the first place. And then you're like, well, see, that proves it. Everybody does leave me. Yeah, but would they have left you if you hadn't have acted that way? So you create in another person what you see of them. That's what we call the self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay? So the Harvard did a study where they took kids in a classroom and randomly selected them to be either in the smart group or the dumb group. They never tested these kids. They just randomly picked names out of the hat and then told the teacher, we tested all of their IQs, and this is the list of kids who scored really high on the IQ score, and the rest of them were pretty low. They were below average. And then they looked to see how did the kids do by the end of the year. And you can probably guess, these smart kids did much better in class, behaviorally as well as academically, than the dumb kids, even though they were just randomly selected. They were never actually tested.
Is that a placebo?
It's not a placebo, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the teacher thought, oh, this is the smart kid. So even though the teachers didn't consciously say, I'm going to spend more time with them or treat them differently, they ended up doing that because they thought this is a smart kid. So if this is a smart kid, I'm going to challenge them more. I'm going to spend a bit more time, one-on-one time, to try to, get them more educated, because they need more time because they're advanced. And the dumb kids, they're dumb, so why would I waste my time on a kid who's dumb? And so unconsciously, they start acting differently towards somebody because they expect them to be a certain way. So like I told you about my mom, she was born at Albert Einstein Hospital. They assumed she's going to be smart, so they created a smart person, the Pygmalion effect. Interesting, huh? So be careful of what you expect of the people around you because they'll live up to your expectations. Okay, this is boring stuff. We'll just skip it for now. All right, mental retardation. So IQ less than 70 is considered mentally retarded. Now, originally, the term for mental retardation was moron. That was a psychological term. And then that became controversial, so then we called them idiots. Okay, that was the official term. And then there's too many kids calling each other that, so then we changed it to mental retardation. And of course, now we call each other retards. And so now we tend, this is still the official term, but it's more politically correct to say like, well, it was mentally disabled, and then to say somebody who's disabled was politically incorrect. So now it's otherwise able. What was that?
Mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged, and now I hear people saying, oh, you shouldn't say that. They're not challenged, they're just different. Of course, now also if you say somebody's different, that's offensive. Everything's offensive. So you might as well not worry about it. Just say whatever you want. 47 million Americans, okay, out of a country of 350 million. Now, this is the whole gamut of mental retardation. From 70, which is very well functioning, they can live on their own, hold down a job, have a family, all the way down to, I think the lowest you can score is 40 on the IQ. Okay. Below that, you can't answer questions, so we really don't know how low the IQ score can get. 0 is probably dead. Now, the interesting thing is some people who have mental retardation have what we call islands of excellence. They're super talented in one area. Has anybody seen this movie? Tom Cruise and what's his face?
Yeah,
Green Man? Yep. So he was mentally retarded, but he could count things. So, of course, Tom Cruise takes him to Vegas, and there's
so he's savant.
Yes, idiot savant is the official term. But now we drop the idiot part because that's politically incorrect. So savant syndrome is you have this amazing talent in one particular area. So you may not be able to function. You can't even tie your shoelaces, but you can play the piano as well as, who's a good piano player? Beethoven, okay? You may not be able to, you may not have the control or the mental capacity to go to the bathroom on the toilet and you have to wear diapers, but you can sculpt these amazing statues. This is really interesting thing. And what they believe is happening is that you only have so many neurons in your brain. And once they're gone, they're gone. You can't get them back, which is why the issue with drug use. FYI there, just keep that in mind. And so your brain dedicates certain neurons to certain intelligence, certain areas of your brain. So if you're a musician, you have more neurons dedicated to music than you do to other parts of the brain. So you'll be great in music, but then you tend to suffer in other things. So Mozart had, like, his whole brain was just music. He had no social skills whatsoever. He had no business skills. He was like a 12-year-old, irresponsible little brat that nobody liked. He actually died in poverty as an alcoholic, and he was buried in an unmarked grave, so we don't know where Mozart was buried. That's how his life ended up. But he was so amazing in music that, so back then what you would do is a patron would come and say, I want to purchase an opera from you, write up this opera, I'll pay you, and then we'll do the opera. So Mozart had somebody who had purchased an opera from him, he was supposed to be writing it. The guy came to him and said, look, I've hired the actors, we've made the props, rehearsal starts tomorrow, and I have no music from you. Have you written it? He goes, no, but I'll have it to you tomorrow. And in one night, he wrote this entire 3-hour opera. He said, I've already have it in my head, I just have to write it now. But he couldn't be bothered. It's like, I've already composed it, but it's just too much work to get it written down. So he waited until the night before to write down a 3-hour opera. How long would it take you to write 5 seconds of an opera, right? To even get the concept of the opera.
Well, if you're musically literate, not that long.
Right. So if you have the neurons dedicated to music, you can do it. He had like all of his neurons dedicated to music, so his social skills suffered, his business skills suffered, and so on. Okay, so savant syndrome seems to be that an extreme amount of neurons have been dedicated to this one ability. So they're super talented in one thing, but they're at mental retardation level in everything else. They don't have the neurons. Okay. Okay. We'll go on. Let's see. So we know there's genetic issues, there's environmental issues, Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, which only boys get, autism. Again, autism is controversial. Is it really mental retardation or not? Let me see. How many of you have seen that video with the autistic girl? You saw a documentary? Let me see if I can find it. It's getting close. Got about 10 minutes. You can handle it. Environmentally, you have fetal alcohol syndrome, which is what?
When your mother's an alcoholic when you're pregnant.
Your mother's an alcoholic when you're pregnant. Does it affect you if dad drinks? Research shown it might a little bit. Smoking has been proven to affect the baby. Okay, so dad, if you smoke when you have sex and get her pregnant, it's affected the DNA in your sperm. Yeah, absolutely. It's not 100% genetic, but there is a genetic component. Certain people have genes that predispose them to be low in neurotransmitters that certain drugs stimulate. So if you're low in serotonin, you'd be really attracted to alcohol. Whereas if you're low in dopamine, you might be more attracted to cocaine, and so on. So, and that's why druggies have a drug of choice. If you're a hardcore drug user, you want a certain type of drug because that's the one that your body's low in, and so it stimulates you better than other drugs would. Let's see if it comes up. Probably should have gone to YouTube. All right, well that loads. So you have other things, childhood diseases, exposure to environmental toxins. Here we go. Red food coloring, pesticides, herbicides, all those chemicals. Our kids are loaded with chemicals nowadays. BPA, bisphenol A, which is from plastics. You hold a receipt from a store in your hand for, I think it's 10 seconds is what the study said, and you get a spike of BPA in your blood, which is toxic.
Oh, nice.
No.
Sorry, yeah. Our world is loaded with pollutants. And so is that affecting people's intelligence? Probably. Okay. Autism skyrockets if you live within a half mile of the freeway. Okay? So get your kids vaccinated, but move away from the freeway. Okay. I mean, think about it. Like, how often do you need to get the tires changed on your car? Depends on how far you drive, but usually once a year. Where's those bits of tire rubber going when they're not on your tires anymore?
In the ground.
In the air, in the ground, all over the place. So if you're living next to the freeway, you're constantly breathing in all those toxic fumes from the car's exhaust, the car's tires, and so on. What is that doing to your body? Probably not good stuff.
What does smelling gas do?
What does the smell of gas do? Okay, there's all those issues. All right, we're going to get through this. Okay, the super gifted, IQ of 150 to 180. Gifted people learn faster. On average, you have to be exposed to information 7 times, if you have an average IQ, 7 times the gift. You have below average IQ, obviously more times. Slightly above average, most people who are smart like you guys would at least be in the above average category, I'm sure. So 3 times. Gifted people 1 time. This is why they started the GATE program in elementary school, because they know gifted people, they get the information faster, they get bored faster, they get into trouble faster. Okay, because we all know boredom causes trouble. So they didn't start this program because the other kids weren't dumb enough. They started this program because the smart kids were getting into trouble all the time, and they had to learn differently. So they were trying to keep these kids from becoming the terrors of the school system. That is why they started it, okay? That's why teachers have to go to special training for the smart kids, because they're the difficult ones. Smart kids like to talk more. Smart kids get into mischief more often. Okay? Smart kids plan coups of their classroom. I mean, smart kids are troublemakers. This level of smart. Okay? What is a child prodigy?
Someone super smart.
Super smart. Mozart. So this is a kid who is typically average intelligent in one area, or in most areas, but genius in one area. So this is a kid that's playing violin at 2 years old. Or that kid that works for NASA now, and he's 14. Okay? Yeah. In 2 weeks, he went to university at, I think, 12, 11, and he went through the entire math curriculum of the school in 2 weeks. And they tested him. He passed it, okay, with flying colors in 2 weeks. He went through trigonometry, calculus, all of those things, okay? So that is a prodigy. Now here's the question. We all hear about child prodigies who are totally screwed up as adults, like Mozart, Michael Jackson, okay? We've breathed long enough for Michael Jackson, right? We can start criticizing him again. Everybody hated Michael Jackson until he died, and all of a sudden he's become like the superhero. So, does a gifted child turn into a gifted adult, or do they turn into a screwed up adult? Both happen. It's not so much the gift that causes it as much as were they put into a situation that sort of spoiled them for the hardships of life. Michael Jackson got everything he wanted at a very young age. Mozart was the Wunderkind, the wonder child of Europe. His dad took him from palace to palace as a little tiny kid to show off, and everybody fawned over him. Look at this amazing child. And then he grew up and is like, guess what? You're competing with all the other good musicians. You might be great, but that doesn't mean there's not other good ones. And you have to put in the hard work, and we criticize you, and you have to deal with it. And so he didn't have that grit in order to succeed. Okay? He was a spoiled child. Now the research does show these gifted, smart kids tend to do great as adults. So it is more of a myth because there's a few people that stand out, and we can easily think of these wonder kids who grew up to have totally screwed up lives. We can easily think of that, so we feel like it's common, but it's actually not. Most of these super talented kids grow up to have fantastic lives, so they kind of have everything. They suck. All right, creativity. Is there a difference? We're almost done. Is there a difference between intelligence and creativity? Yes. Think so? Okay. Are creative people intelligent?
They can be.
They can be. All right, so what was that? We know that creative people tend to be higher in intelligence. Okay? So creative people are usually smart. However, smart people are not always creative. Okay? So they are two totally separate things. Creative people tend to be smart, but intelligent people are not always creative. Okay? You can be that super smart accountant working for the IRS without a creative bone in your body. You're a genius, but zero creativity. Okay? So creativity is basically the ability to come up with novel ideas, novel solutions to problems, things people haven't thought of before. And they think in a different way. Okay? Most people say, okay, I have this issue, what solution can I come up with? Okay, here's a solution, I'm going to go for it. Creative people think of what are all the various solutions to this problem? What are all the ideas I could come up with? And then they pick from the best idea, or maybe they try out a few of them. So one of the tests, for instance, for creativity is, what is this dot? What is it? Could be a number of things.
A dot.
It's a dot. Okay. That's the least creative answer you can come up with. So give me another one. What was that?
It's an eclipse.
An eclipse. That's a new one. Okay.
It's a tunnel.
It's a tunnel. A flower. A grape. That sounds good. That was a grape.
Oh my god. That sounds good.
One student said it's a telephone pole looking down from the top. So that's the wood green. Say it louder.
Come on, it draws all the time.
So you get the idea that
That's a solution.
yes, solution. So creative people come up with a lot of different ideas. Non-creative people tend to come up with 1, 2, 3, But if the more creative you are, the more ideas you can generate out of this. And that's how creative people tend to think. What are all the various things I can think of, even crazy ideas that would never work? They think of them, and then they sort of start narrowing it down. So when I do domestic violence counseling, I have to try to get these guys to be more creative. Okay, so you have an argument with your wife. Okay, how could you take care of it? Yes, you could hit her like you did last time, which got you in prison. Okay, can you come up with another idea? And it's usually very difficult for them to think of what other way. So I have to kind of prod their creativity, give them ideas. There's a million different solutions to an argument. Okay? Smacking her is not the only answer. Okay? It could deal with an argument, but it's also going to land you back in prison. We don't want that. Okay? So they tend to be very uncreative people, and that's one of the issues. They can't come up with multiple ways to solve the problem. All right, last slide. So, what are the characteristics of creative people? They like to use analogies. They can't just teach something straightforward. They have to tell stories about it. Okay? They tend to be highly intelligent. You can have dumb people who are creative, but they're much more likely to be high intelligence. They also have a wide range of interests. The more things you know, the more creative you can be, which is why in America we say you need a rounded education. You want to know a lot of things because we want creative, critical thinkers in this country. They also don't like dogma. What is that?
It's like the central idea of something.
Yes, rules. This is how it has to be. Why? Why does it have to be this way? Why can't I step outside the box? What's the purpose? Give me a good reason, maybe I'll follow the rules, but if it's just there because it's a rule, why do we have it? They like to challenge things. They tend to have high self-esteem, which makes sense. If you're creative, now you could be high self-esteem without creativity, but if you're creative, you will tend to have high self-esteem because you're creating all these wonderful things in life. Why wouldn't you feel good about yourself? They also tend to be very hard workers, particularly about what they're passionate for. Okay?
That explains it.
Let's see. And then here's the last point, which I think is really important. Creative people, creativity is not genetic. It's environmental. So if you are not a creative person, change your environment in order to stimulate your creativity. Break the rules. Okay? Do things outside the box. Travel. Get a coloring book and color. There's all sorts of things you can do. You can go to Barnes. Guys, please. Hello, please. Thank you. I don't want to be constantly fighting over you guys. You can go to Barnes & Noble and you can get a book on creativity. There's all sorts of things you can do in order to increase your creativity. Okay? So, create the right environment for your children. Right? And you'll get creative things. All right, any questions? We're done with intelligence. I know you guys hated this chapter. Okay? We'll do a better one next time. You still have to study it though, because I'm still going to test your butts on it, okay? Learning, although, I don't know, we might do something different next time. All right, adios.
It was sarcastic.